Got to unmute myself. Is this thing on? Hello, hello. Good morning, everyone. We'll be getting started in just a minute as we wait for additional folks to filter into the webinar. But thank you again for attending, and we'll get started shortly. All right, looks like the folks trickling in has slowed down just a bit, so we'll go ahead and get started. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to another Arlington Transportation Partners webinar. My name is Mark Bacumio, a business development manager with ATP, and I will be your host today. So we'll be discussing various flexible workplaces as well as how ATP can help you all as employers to implement them. I think we've all become familiar with remote work and or hybrid work in the last few years, but we hope to provide some additional flexible workplace models and insights that perhaps you, our audience, are not yet aware of. In case you are unfamiliar with GoToWebinar, all of our attendees are muted by default. If you have any questions, you should type them directly into the questions section of your GoToWebinar dashboard. At the end of the presentation, we will address any questions that have been posted. You can expect today's presentation to be about 30 minutes or so, and then we will allow for time for questions at the end. Additionally, this presentation will be recorded and promoted in our monthly newsletter and on our website. So if you have to drop off for whatever reason, or if you have teammates who are unable to attend the live presentation, we've got you covered. You'll be able to return back to the recording of today's webinar at any point on YouTube. So with those housekeeping items being squared away, let's get started. I'd like to start by introducing you all to our very special panelist for today's presentation, Ali Valeka. Ali comes to us today from AECOM, but also serves currently as the ACT or ACT Telework Council Chair. Therefore, we felt she was the perfect person to talk to you all today about perhaps the most popular and well-known version of a flexible workplace arrangement, Telework. She's got some great data and insights for you all today, and I don't want to steal her thunder, so Ali, I'll go ahead and turn the floor over to you.
Great, thanks Mark, and thanks so much for having me this morning. Hope everyone's having a good start to their day. So I'm gonna introduce myself a little bit and then we'll just jump right into some data and information that's hopefully helpful for you and your organizations as you're traveling and moving forward in this new hybrid workspace. As Mark said, I'm a TDM project manager, transportation demand management project manager at AECOM. We've got about 100 folks within the TDM as well as safe routes to school space that are working on trip reduction, getting people safely into other modes other than driving alone worldwide, and focusing obviously on moving people as efficiently as possible during peak periods and within the transportation systems that we all have access to. I do get to support our national sustainable mobility practice. And so much like the folks at ATP there are working with businesses and organizations to help get cars off the road. I'm working in Virginia, Connecticut, Tennessee, Georgia, Florida, and Texas currently getting to help support some of those same efforts. So bring some insights from there as well into some of the conversation today. And then as Mark said, I am the ACT Telework Council Chair. So if you want to jump to the next slide, if you're not familiar with the Association for Commuter Transportation, it's very much the trade organization for folks who are working in this space. Membership ranges from transit agencies to DOTs to local transportation management associations. Employers who are invested in getting cars off the road can be members. And I have the joy and pleasure of leading the Telework Council. We're hovering around 80 members strong within the council. And the shortened version is the Telework Council. It's actually the Telework and Alternative Work Arrangements Council is the official title, but that's kind of a mouthful. And one of the things that we do is we host quarterly meetings talking about things very much related to telework and hybrid work and alternate work arrangements that our members are facing, that they're trying to grapple with and to find solutions for within their work sites. So Mark, if you'll hit next slide, just a few examples to give you of some of the things we've been doing within the Telework Council over the last few years. Is we actually created a hoteling showcase where we brought in some of the technology providers who help employers figure out how to set up hoteling within work sites, and provided some resources there to our members. Also, we've helped highlight and illustrate hybrid strategies and what may work for different work sites. We've also created a resource library where programs around the country who have created resources to help employers and organizations can share those with our members. We also like to bring in speakers to the Telework Council to share information related to what we're working on. You guys may have heard the global nonprofit called 4 Day Week, who is working in countries around the world to encourage companies to adopt 4-day work weeks. So not compressing hours into 10-hour days, but really to work 32 hours a week. And there's some really interesting stats there. We've had those folks come and speak to our council before, as well as folks who are implementing telework and hybrid programs around the country to share lessons learned, challenges, all that. And then ACT also puts on a handful of conferences every year, and we get the pleasure of hosting content at each of those conferences. So we've highlighted specific employers from different sectors, different sizes, different areas of the countries to talk about their programs, how we leverage folks like you within organizations to make these programs more efficient. And then, as you can imagine, there was definitely telework experts pre-pandemic that had been working for many years on the public and private sector side to implement telework and hybrid work programs. But that's really exploded, obviously, over the last 4 years as well, in helping businesses kind of figure out the policy side. As you can imagine, there's been a ton of what's the word I'm looking for? Less structured telework that's been going on for years and years. And with the height of the pandemic, organizations are really looking at putting better structure to everything that they're doing. So Mark, we'll go next slide, which is kind of a nice segue into the first data point. What I'm gonna go through from here with you guys very quickly is just a bunch of data and kind of research that's been done over the last few months. It's fairly up to date, as you can imagine. The information changes quickly, and so it's great that there are definitely some folks out there who are doing research and able to provide us very up-to-date data. A bunch of different data sources. I've included a bunch of those on purpose, so if you ever are looking to dig into data or find specific information about kind of what the trends are that you want to share either below you in your organization or up the chain, hopefully this is helpful for you all. So the first slide that I have to show you is just related to the American Community Survey. And as you guys are likely aware, there's some questions about how folks travel to and from work. And so what you're looking for here is when the question is asked, how do you usually get to work? This is the response rate for folks who said that they work from home. And so I'm sure there's no surprise there. We had kind of slow growth in the early 2000s. We definitely hit a peak, and then we seem to be normalizing out a little bit here. I always share this slide and information with folks because the way that the question is asked is really, you have to pick one way that you get to work. So this assumes that the people who responded to this question this way are working remotely at least 3 days a week, right? It's their dominant travel mode to get to and from work. So we also know that there is a ton of telework and hybrid work where folks are only doing it 1 or 2 days a week, and that information is often not captured in this question. So just wanted to remind folks of that caveat there, that while we say 15.2% of folks are working remotely, it's probably actually a little bit higher than that as we look at those folks who may be doing it 1 or 2 days a week. Next slide, Mark. Thanks. This is from Work From Home Research. There are a bunch of researchers who have come together, and they were doing a lot of this data collection pre-pandemic as well. It's led by Nick Bloom out of Stanford, and they're doing surveys of about 20,000 people and releasing data every month. The questions are not always the same month to month, right? So as kind of what's happening in the world, their survey questions will focus in on those conversations to bring data to support answers to some of those questions. So this is actually the data from their June survey that they just released in July, and I just pulled a couple of slides from this most recent data. It's covering my screen and I always forget the acronym. WFHresearch.com is the way to access all of their information, and you can download these slides yourself for free. But this is an interesting slide just to take a look at kind of the difference between workers' desires to work from home and then what employers' plans are to work from home. And so as you can see, there is a gap, and there has always been a gap, which again, I don't think is super surprising, but we are seeing kind of an interest more in a little above 2.75 days per week is what employers are more interested in working, and then employer plans are, hovering above 2 days a week. And so I think you're probably maybe dealing this within your organization too, the big debate between 2 days or 3 days in office, if your organization is in that space. So I think if you're grappling with that, you are not the only folks who are. This is happening really, trending across the country. Next slide, Mark. Wanted to also give you a hint too at where we're seeing work from home being most prevalent in terms of industries and sectors. This might also be helpful depending on your organization and what you do. I don't think a huge surprise here in where we're seeing the most days per week working from home in some of these sectors, but there may be some surprises here, or this may be data that you can help also share up the chain as you're trying to make decisions, or really honestly kind of adapt your policy to where you are today. Great. This slide is from Scoop, and they have been doing a quarterly flex index. And so the interesting thing through Scoop's flex index is they're gathering data from a few different ways. And so there's some surveying, as well as they've created some employer relationships that they've kind of created their own employer database where you can go get specific information about employers based on sector, size, and the trends of the types of programming that they're implementing. They've also recently started their own Flex GPT, where you can ask questions of their resource and it will create data and visuals that will answer the question that you may be wanting to display. So if you're trying to look for information specific to your industry, geography, any of those things, that could be a good tool for you to look into. So again, that's the Scoop Flex Index. And again, you can access all of this information on their website for free. But I found this also to be really interesting. If you're not grappling with is it a 2 or 3 days a week, it may be figuring out how flexible is our hybrid work program, right? Are we setting a minimum threshold of days? Are we giving employees the chance to choose? Are we being very specific and we need everyone here on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, or Tuesdays and Thursdays, right? There's a lot of different ways that we can implement hybrid. And so we're seeing I believe this is the Q2 data for the Scoop Index. So again, this is very recent, but you can see that 47% of requiring a minimum days a week, which I feel like is what we hear the most about. But even there too, right, there's a lot of folks who are giving employees the choice to choose. Now, obviously, these percentages change as you start to look at the size of organizations. And so again, like I said, if you're interested in more of that, there is definitely a lot more data to dig in here if you're trying to see where your organization might shake out with some of this data. Perfect. Gallup has a ton of research as well on hybrid and remote work. And a lot of this also really starts to get into less of what are you doing, but how is it impacting employees and operations and engagement and retention. And so I wanted to share just a few things from Gallup, and this is from their HR Roundtable survey. This is not as recent. I will say I feel like their data is not updated as often, but still, I think a very trusted, good resource here. And this really kind of gets at to executives' attitudes towards the work. I think some of the trends that we're hearing with RTO mandates and getting folks back into the office is really related to how executives perceive that hybrid work is impacting their business is. And so there's some very interesting things here showing kind of where we're seeing negative attitudes and those attributes of executives. And so this might also be helpful too as you're thinking about what's happening in your organization and maybe what that experience is of executives. The next slide really gets into managers. And I am a big proponent of employee retention lives and dies with the direct manager. And so this is, really kind of getting at employees who are engaged and have less intent to leave, often feel like their employer and their manager cares more about them. And so I think there's some interesting notes here too, as we're thinking about how our hybrid work models might impact retention and keeping our good employees, but really also kind of highlighting and focusing on that role that the manager plays as we're implementing hybrid programs. So Mark, we'll go next slide. Thanks so much. Gartner has, this is a little bit older graphic, but to me, it's always been really helpful when we're thinking about the getting folks in the office on the days that we want them there, or how are we structuring what our in-office days look like. And I think this is a really good graphic to take with you and to think about how are we structuring our in-office days and our hybrid days, our work from home days, in a way that makes sense and is meaningful for employees, right? And really thinking about the type of work that we're doing. Are we, when we're in the office and we need to be working separately, what type of work is that? If we're in the office and we need to be working together, or really taking it backwards, right? What kind of work do we need to do together? How often do we need to do that? How much time does it take? Can we use that kind of information to kind of drive what our hybrid schedule looks like? And so this is, I think, always been really helpful in thinking about, nobody wants to send employees into the office to put on headphones and sit on Zoom calls every day. And so really kind of thinking about the type of work that's being done, at the team level, at the department level might be really helpful in shaping policies that are, conducive to getting people in the office and then making that time in the office really meaningful. And then just to provide you just a few kind of tips and thoughts as we're thinking about what our hybrid work models look like. And we may be in hybrid work models right now that aren't working or that aren't the best for our businesses. And so some things to think about, like I said, really empowering managers to think through how we can make sure that they are most confident and supported in the work that's happening when it's done hybrid or in the office in these remote capacities. Managers are more important than location when it comes to engagement and well-being of employees. There's data that backs that up. That's what this link here is, and I can put it in the chat when I'm done speaking if there's an interest there. But managers play a big role in helping hybrid work be successful and making sure that they are empowered to make a hybrid work model work best for their team and the work that they need to complete. A big thing around hybrid and remote work, I think we hear it a lot when we hear about RTO mandates currently, is that it very much feels like there's a lack of trust. And so how can we focus and foster trust within our organization so that employees don't feel micromanaged? And so a lot of that can be really focusing on the end game, not necessarily the minutia to get us there. And recognition and supporting good work within the organization is another way that can really foster good trust within the organization. Structured office days, like I said, really kind of using that time when we're in our office to focus on team tasks, coaching and development, all of those things that we know work better when we're face-to-face. Let's structure our time so that we're doing those when we have the opportunity to be face-to-face. And like I said, there's a lot of data. Also, as ATP is in the place of getting cars off the road, employees don't want to waste time on commuting. So if we're going to commute to the office, let's make it meaningful when we get there. And then last note here too, building a strong hybrid policy. Pre-pandemic, there was a lot of kind of ad hoc telework where we didn't have policies helping dictate how we work from home, right? We have policies that tell us how we can take PTO and how to use our health benefits, but we didn't always have good policies for remote work and hybrid work. And so continuing to focus on these policies that detail clear expectations, that help define the roles and responsibilities of how we work remotely, so that we're creating good habits when we're working remotely as well as in the office. And then really thinking about how we evaluate success. Not all jobs come with very easy quantitative ways to measure success. And so thinking through that on the front end so that it's transparent through our hybrid work policies can also be a really nice tool to make hybrid work policies work, and then kind of avoid that gray area that comes up sometimes with these hybrid work programs. And the last slide, Mark, I just wanted to hit on, knowing that I know you're going to talk about some flexibility after this, but I think what's really important to think about with hybrid work models as well is that not everyone has the opportunity to work remotely within an organization, right? There are some positions that just have to be on site. And so when you think about working remotely, there's all the ways that you can incorporate flexibility, right? I think that's the greatest benefit of working remotely, is it offers some flexibility for folks, but there's other ways to incorporate flexibility in the workplace. So thinking kind of about the who, what, when, where, how of where and who's doing work and how we can create some of that flexibility. There may be opportunities to expose people to different teams, different leaders, different activities happening within the organization that might provide some flexibility in kind of just letting your brain be exposed to other things or learning new things. The what of what we're doing, another piece of that too, right? Getting exposed to new tasks, involving some cross training, or even just observing to understand how things happen within the business. Obviously, time is a big thing where we can provide some more flexibility for folks who have to be on site or in the office. Perhaps also maybe not just the where of the working remotely, but maybe there are other locations that are close by that could be reduced commute trips, or it could just make commuting easier in a way. And then also thinking about how can we make work more flexible? There are likely tasks that someone does in a job that requires them to be on site Monday through Friday, or whatever the work schedule may be, where they may be able to do some of that remotely or use some new technology to do things in a different way. So always just want to encourage you to think kind of holistically about flexibility. I know there's been such a spotlight on hybrid and telework over the last few years, but I think there's also more ways that we can think about flexibility in the workplace as well, to keep our employees happy, engaged, and keeping the good work moving within our organizations. And so with that, Mark, I'll pass it back over to you.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Ali, for providing such awesome data and visuals regarding telework. That being said, as you mentioned, perhaps you, our audience, your company is not able to continue a remote model. We get it. That being said, the analytics concerning remote work and how it pertains to employee retention and satisfaction can certainly be applied to flexible arrangements other than telework. So the flexible workplace examples that I wanted to highlight for you today, other than telework, are going to be flex time, also known as a staggered schedule, compressed work schedules, and seasonal flexible work schedules. And that simply just means implementing some kind of flexible workplace on a seasonal or recurring temporary basis. And I wanted to call out as well that telework is able to supplement or complement any of the above flexible workplace examples listed. So let's talk a little bit about flex time schedules. In a flex time or staggered schedule workplace, an employee will work the same number of hours and days per week that they currently work, but they are shifted to avoid peak commute hours and other life obligations. A flex time schedule is generally something that is approved by a manager and remains consistent from week to week. The example on the slide given shows 8 hours being worked on Monday through Wednesday, 9 hours worked on Thursday, and 7 hours worked on Friday. So you're still hitting 40 hours a week while managing to avoid, if you notice below, some of the worst commuting times. And as mentioned previously, this type of schedule is also great for employees who need to make time for things like recurring doctor appointments, or perhaps picking up their children from the daycare a little bit earlier. Moving on, I'd like to now talk about compressed workplace schedules. So compressed are similar to flex time in that they also ensure that employees work the same number of hours per a 1 week or 2 week period, but they're different in the sense that employees will be working a day less generally. There are a few different models for compressed workplaces, but the two most popular are the 1 week 410 schedule and the 2-week 980 schedule. So let's talk a little bit about what that means. 410 means 4 days, 10 hours. So the employee is working a 4-day work week at 10 hours a day, meaning they get 1 day off of the traditional work week, usually a Friday. Now, similarly, 980 means that you are working 9 days to hit 80 hours in 2 weeks. So the naming convention there is a little bit different. But this means that an employee works 9 days in 2 weeks to get 1 day off every other week. In this model, over the course of 2 weeks, employees, will work 9 hours for 8 of their days, usually Monday through Thursday, and 8 hours for the remaining day, usually a Friday, and get the other Friday in that 2-week period off. So refer to the samples that I provided below if you'd like a visual of what I am explaining. I'll call out as well that the 980 compressed schedule is the flexible workplace model that we here at ATP do choose to use, and many of our employees do commit to, though not everyone. So to any of my clients in the webinar, if you have reached out to me on a Friday and I did not get back to you, I very well may have been on my compressed day off. So moving on, I'd just like to chat briefly about implementing a flexible workplace arrangement on a seasonal basis. This just means that you would implement one of the models listed previously, whether it be telework, flex time, or a compressed schedule, on a seasonal basis, most commonly summer. If you're iffy about implementing a flexible workplace arrangement, or you're unsure about committing to a full workplace shift, then perhaps try piloting a flexible workplace policy for a season or on a temporary basis to gauge if it's the right fit for your business. If your workplace has a season that is considered, the busy season, as some companies do, then perhaps complement it with a seasonal flexible workplace in the off season when perhaps things are not as busy. Even offering a flexible workplace on a temporary basis is a great incentive for both potential and current employees who may have never experienced such a policy. So why implement a flexible workplace? Why now? Now more than ever, employees want to feel respected and heard by their employers. That goes a long way as far as employee retention and satisfaction goes. Many have become accustomed to the work-life balance changes that came from being remote or partially remote, and flexible workplaces can help employees to maintain that work-life balance. When employees feel that their employer is meeting their needs, then satisfaction goes up, which leads to higher employee performance and retention. So in 2022, Gallup did a study on employee retention and remote work, and the findings did show that a whopping 94% of employees preferred hybrid or remote scheduling in some way, shape, or form, while 74% even claimed that lacking those flexible options would be enough for them to leave their job. And also highlighted on the page here, you can see some of the benefits that from the same study employees were showing that they would like to see in order to stay. Now, of course, there are going to be other benefits than just employee retention. By creating a flexible arrangement that caters to an employee's needs, you can also reduce tardiness due to avoiding long commutes or absences from work if they are able to work remotely. Employees will be saving money that they would otherwise be spending on commute costs if they are able to avoid some of those worst commuting times or work from home. And they will also have the groundwork set in place to continue working if there are any workplace disruptions that may prevent coming into a traditional office setting. Now, employers also do benefit from offering flexible arrangements. Of course, employee retention is great for the employer as well, but also by scaling down on in-office requirements, employers can expect to scale down their spaces as well and reduce costs associated with doing so. And as mentioned previously, businesses are going to benefit greatly from being able to continue operations, even in the case of unexpected workplace or building closures. And then, of course, the added benefit of getting cars off the road does reduce emissions and benefit the environment. So how can Arlington Transportation Partners help you? How can we help you all with implementing a flexible workplace policy? arrangement? Well, first of all, we do have several guides for flexible workplaces, including Telework. These are available for download on our website, or you can get in contact with your ATP rep to bring you a physical copy if you would prefer that. All the work that ATP does is complimentary, so we can, assess your business needs and offer complimentary consultations to determine if a flexible workplace policy is going to be appropriate for you. Just going on with tools and resources in addition to the guides, we can assess your telework eligibility for employees, kind of analyze performance and behavior to determine if telework or remote work or flexible arrangements are a good fit for your employees. There are also a number of logistical employment regulations that do come with working remotely or, again, in a flexible arrangement, and so we can help to navigate those regulations as well. And then, of course, we provide information on navigating commute modes in conjunction with a flexible workplace. So things like transit, active forms of transportation, you name it, that is something that ATP is able to assist your business with. And then, of course, you can gain recognition through implementing flexible workplace policies through ATP's recognition program champions, though we also assist our clients with earning local, regional, and national recognition through various other organizations as well. So let's talk a little bit about what a step-by-step implementation of a flexible workplace policy can look like at your business. This is definitely a very high-level overview of it, but you get a meeting with an ATP representative, and then we can go into this a bit further. But essentially, it starts all by identifying business needs. There needs to be a reason why you want to implement a flexible schedule. Perhaps it's, again, employee retention and satisfaction. Perhaps the commute is something that you're hearing a lot of complaints about. Identify these business needs and verify employee interest with ATP assistance to determine if you would like to implement a flexible workplace policy. 2 is to actually develop the policy. Let's determine what model works best for you, whether it be telework, flex time, or a compressed schedule, or something else. We can determine what best fits those needs identified in the first step. 3 is formalizing the program. So as you get a better idea of what it is that you want to develop at your work site, ATP can help to establish a formal policy in your employee handbook or guidebook, whatever you may have, and get approval from company leadership and any relevant stakeholders. 4, communicate. Of course, you're going to want to communicate these changes to all necessary stakeholders, whether they be employees or anyone higher up. ATP is happy to do on-site presentations, lunch and learns, you name it, to encourage participation and improve education on these topics. And then 5, of course, once you've actually implemented the policy, let's monitor the performance. Let's determine how well it's going. Are we seeing some of those attitudes towards the workplace shifting for the better? Based on the performance of the policy, we can certainly adjust as necessary to best meet the needs of your business. Things like performance reviews, one-on-one meetings, and even surveys are something that ATP is able to assist with. And lastly, I just wanted to talk about some general tips for managing a flexible workplace for any of the models that we talked about in today's presentation. Seems like a little bit of a no-brainer, but you'd be surprised how many times I've heard about a teleworker receiving their equipment only to find a faulty webcam or a sticky key on the laptop, something along those lines. So test your equipment, test all equipment before the period starts. Make sure that employees are provided with additional supplies beyond just the bare minimum to perform at their best. Things like a second monitor for a laptop if employees travel a lot, or a additional mouse and mouse pad to assist with a laptop setup. These are all things that go a long way in improving employee satisfaction in a flexible workplace. Provide training opportunities to employees to familiarize themselves with the arrangement. And then it's recommended highly that even if employees are not coming into the office regularly, that you do establish some form of face-to-face time. It doesn't have to be weekly, but even something like monthly or bi-monthly, just to get that face-to-face time, that can go a long way in managing a flexible workplace. Remote workers also want to be included in things. So if they're in office celebrations, extend the invite to your remote workers, whether they just participate virtually or are able to come on site in person. And then lastly, check-ins. I think it can be really easy to lose track of what your employees are doing in a remote environment or a flexible environment, if they're working hours that you are not, or if they are not in the same location as you. So check in. This is going to be the best way that you can get a good grasp of how they are performing, what they are accomplishing, and overall just helps to increase business performance. So these are just some tips that I wanted to leave you all with. That brings us to the conclusion of our presentation. If you have any questions that you'd like to ask, please direct them to the questions tab in your GoToWebinar dashboard. Currently, I do not see any questions, but we will stay live for just a couple of minutes to see if any are filtered in. And if you do think of any questions after today's presentation, then of course, reach out to ATP. You can contact us at our website, or you can reach out to me directly at the email provided on the screen to answer any questions that come in after today. And as I mentioned previously, this will also be recorded and uploaded online, so you will have access to today's information and speakers even beyond today's presentation. But if there are no further questions, I'd just like to thank all the attendees for joining us, joining ATP today, and I wish you all a great rest of your week. I'll just stay open for anyone who would like to ask a couple of questions, if any. But otherwise, I'll close in 2 minutes. Thank you to all the positive comments in the chat. We really appreciate it. Seeing that most folks have filtered out now and no further questions have been posted, I think we can call this a wrap on the webinar. Thank you again so much to Ali, our guest speaker for today, providing some awesome information. We are really glad to have you. But thank you again, everyone, and hope you all have a great rest of your week. Bye-bye.